Right now, we're going to welcome on our next guest. We've got Lauren Beagen, the Maritime Professor, joining us to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Bed Bath & Beyond lawsuit. Lauren, thank you for being here. It's great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me. I am a Skittles fan, so I just want to put that out there.
So you just can't go shopping in California. That's,
I'm going to stock up.
There you go. Let's talk about this lawsuit, because it's, of course, one that kind of is potentially precedent setting for retailers versus maritime carriers. And we're watching this unfold. What are some of the latest updates on the suit?
Sure. So we've had a new Bed Bath & Beyond filing. So previously, I think we talked about before, in April, we had Bed Bath & Beyond filed against OOCL, so the Orient Overseas Container Line Limited and OOCL Europe Limited. Now, recently, September 12th, we had a filing by Bed Bath & Beyond against Yang Ming Marine Transport Corporation. And so what these are is these lawsuits are talking about the service contracts and basically failing to meet service commitments under those service contracts.
And Lauren, we're looking at this. One of the big things I think of course, these are big entities at play here. Really, this could be drawn out for years. What are we looking at in terms of phases and potential next steps, or even an end game or resolution here?
Yeah, so this is part of a group of filings on behalf of shippers and beneficial cargo owners that really are set to change the entire case law around this. So by looking at the service contracts and by kind of having this forcing of honoring the service contract commitments, this is going to be an entirely new area for the Federal Maritime Commission. And so it is going to take a while, because even when the Federal Maritime Commission makes this determination, and usually they don't make their initial decision for months and months on end, maybe even out to a year, because they have discovery, they have all of that. It takes a while because they go through a real lawsuit formal procedure. Once they get there, it can still be appealed. And so that's what we've actually seen with some of the other cases that are similar to this. MCS versus MSC was a very long, drawn-out procedural matter. There was an initial decision filed there, but now it's on exceptions, which is essentially an appeal. And so the finality of what the administrative law judge found in that initial decision, which that case was 2021, 2022, is still ongoing. And so that one was also about minimum quantity commitments for these service contracts, basically saying that the ocean carrier has to honor what they agreed to in a service contract. But it's still ongoing. It's still being appealed. And then once it gets finality in the Federal Maritime Commission system, they can still be appealed outside into an appellate court. So this has a potential to go on for a while.
So I think one of the main issues that is kind of at stake here is the fact that Bed Bath & Beyond, which of course filed for bankruptcy, I believe it was just about a year ago now, blamed part of that bankruptcy on the fact that they had to pay extra because of what was going on with the ocean carriers and their failure to live up to those service contracts. Again, that's not for us to decide if that's factual or not, that's part of their bankruptcy blame. But at the end of the day, that is a fact, is that shippers had to pay an exorbitant amount and really line the pockets of these carriers that did very, very well during the COVID-19 pandemic. And those service commitments were still not being honored. Are we looking at maybe just a precedent being set of, okay, carriers can only charge this much extra before they are cut off and say, hey, you have to perform because you're being paid? Or what does that potential solution look like? And is there any way for Bed Bath & Beyond to recoup some of that money that they were put out?
Yeah, so I think the real question here is, are these service contracts true contracts that force action, right? And so the service contracts have been sometimes argued to be a little illusory, right? A little bit of like a handshake, and yet they're not requiring the parties to actually commit under the terms of the contract there. So service contracts are a function of the Shipping Act, which falls under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Maritime Commission. And so this is a series of case law that really is, do we have something that is going to require the parties to the contract to actually honor what they agreed to here or not? And so if not, then that means that Yang Ming, in this instance, allegedly forcing Bed Bath & Beyond to go to the spot market outside of this pre-agreed upon potentially better rates, right? Because service contracts are actually confidentially fired. But you think that they probably have better rates for a commitment to a certain amount of movement of goods. Maybe if this comes out, toward Yangming or the ocean carriers on this side, it might be regular practice to say, look, we ran out of space this month. We're going to push you out to the spot market, because some of these service contracts aren't so specific to say this week you're required to have this amount of cargo moved and reserve the space for the contract carrier here. But sometimes, it's like we're going to have 3,000 TEUs moved over an entire year. And so by saying, well, the first week of December, I want to move this stuff per our contract. Well, the contract doesn't say the first week of December. It says for the year of 2021. And so that's part of the discussion here is it enough to say, 3,000 TEUs over the course of the year? But is that specific that you actually can hold somebody to that? Because you can't move 3,000 TEUs the last week of December, right? And so how does that break down over the course of a year?
So obviously, if you're a shipper, this is a lot of stress on you because, as you mentioned, you have to kind of toe the line between being broad to account for changing demand cycles, but also being very specific in order to ensure that you have that guaranteed capacity. Is there a point now where this changes the shipping industry for a complete whole, and maybe you look at going to monthly contracts or quarterly contracts in order to make sure that people are hitting their service expectations and still allowing for that flexibility of being able to change as demand cycles change?
I think that's what we might see come from this. I think, like I said, if they're going to start looking at how much specificity is required for these service contracts to be enforceable. And so I think that might be something that the administrative law judge or somewhere along the line of this case law determines, is what's the level of specificity required to actually say, no, this was the term that you agreed to, and this is the term that you're supposed to honor. Because exactly that, right? The movements change. We have peak season. We have, kind of lull seasons. So if you push everything into peak season, there just isn't capacity for that. And that's when the spot markets are going to go through the roof, right? Because everybody's trying to get space on these vessels. And so I really think that those are going to be some of those specific, and maybe we're not going to hit them. Maybe we won't hit them with this case law, but that's what this case law is starting to do, is starting to open up those conversations so that the Federal Maritime Commission and the parties involved are saying, we want some clarity here. And so the FMC is going to be forced to apply it to the Shipping Act, because that's what is ultimately ruling their decision making here, is what does the Shipping Act say, and how does that come down to these service contracts, and how specific do the service contracts need to be enforceable?
Lauren, always great having you on, always insightful. If people want to reach out or get more of your content, how can they do that?
Sure, themaritimeprofessor.com, or Squall Strategies is my legal company.
There you go, and follow her on LinkedIn as well for some great insights. But Lauren, thank you for joining us. Right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Freight Waves Now after this.